Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Malcolm Maestrel and I'm a Membership Services Coordinator with the IAAP. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Developments in the International Standards for Accessibility in the Built Environment, 3 case studies. Before we begin, we have a few general housekeeping items to go over. Closed captioning is provided. To enable closed captioning, select the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The stream text link will be posted in the chat as well. ASL translation is also provided. Microphones are muted to prevent any background noise or disruptions. Please leave your questions in the Q&A. The chat will be monitored for general dialogue and technical issues. Today's webinar will be recorded and available in our webinar archives. And now I would like to turn today's program over to our presenter, Delfin Jimenez.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure for me doing this time with you. And I think let's go directly with our issue. I'm going to share the screen. Please let me know if I'm sharing correctly the screen.
Everything looks good.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Well, then our issue today is news in the international accessibility standards and accessibility in the built environment, and we have 3 case studies. First, sorry, oops. First, let me briefly introduce myself. Well, I have PhD in architecture. I'm from Madrid, Spain. I'm the director of the architectural firm, ECAR, for accessibility in planning and accessibility in building. Also, I'm consultant and auditor expert in universal accessibility. I'm a member of several international committees on new accessibility standards, like ISO, Sensenalec in Europe, UNE in Spain. Also, I'm an IAAP member with certificate in built environment, and a Smart Cities for All member in country representative program. Also, I'm the president of ASEPAU. ASEPAU is the Spanish Association of Universal Accessibility Professionals. Well, I think that's enough. You know, Malcolm said IAAP will have a recording of the webinar available for you in case you need to review it, anything. And remember, this is an altruistic activity offered to share knowledge. So please respect the copyright and do not screenshot or make use of this material for your business. Thank you in advance for that. Well, let's go. I think first it's necessary to put in context. Well, when we are talking about regulations and standards, maybe we have in our country what is the mandatory legislation and regulation. Okay, every country have their regulations, but that regulation are the minimum criteria in a scale from 1 to 10. The mandatory legislation is in the middle, is in 5 over 10. Okay, it's the minimum, but there are other documents. How about going for excellence? For excellence, at the top of the scale, we have standards and guides, good practice, guidelines, and then it's important to different these two types of documents when we talk about standards and regulations. And then it's important, legality or excellence. Go in the minimum, legal, or at the top. With this idea, mandatory regulations, that is our first rule when we prepare one work. What do you think is our finish, our goal, or is the starting point? Well, I have a friend that he said, the project that limits itself only to the minimum required by the regulations is the worst of all possible projects, because less is already illegal. I invite you to think about how you use regulation as a target or as a starting point, because it's different in theory when what I think and the practice, what I do. And then do you use mandatory regulations as a goal or a reference for the beginning? Okay, well, today we are going to see three standards, three non-mandatory standards, and then inside of them there are different types of requirements. There are basic considerations and also are recommendations. And then how can we difference? How can we understand when is a basic consideration and when is just a recommendation? Well, it's clear, and you probably already know this, but you always find the same terminology. Within every sentence, we find shall or should. If you read shall, then it's a basic consideration. If you read should, it's just a recommendation. This is a useful tool to understand better all these standards, especially not for for people that is not English is not their language. I think it's useful. Well, last year, 2021, it was an important year for international standards in accessibility, because we get 3 new documents. The new ISO 21542, second edition, the about accessibility in built environment, the ISO 21942 about accessible tourism for all, and in Europe, the EN 17210 about functional requirements about accessibility in the built environment. Well, they are our case study today. And then let's go. The first one, ISO 21542, accessibility of the built environment. I'm sure you know it because it's the most famous standard about accessibility in the built environment. And for more than a decade, I think 11 years from the first edition, and it's a reference in many countries. Well, last year we have a new version, the second version. But what's new? What's new in this new version? Let's go. The first one. The first, we have a new structure with different levels. At the beginning, in the first edition, 2011, we had only 2 levels, but we have 42 sections and 5 annexes. There's a very plain structure, and so boring and a little bit difficult to find some things. Now, in this edition, we have 3 levels with only 12 sections and 7 annexes. Now it's much easier to understand and easier to find the different things. New structure imply restructuring of several clauses and subclauses. Some of them merge, some of them change the place in the document. You can imagine. I think, of course, it's new regular actions in every standard revisions. The editorial revision, the update references, the revision of terms and definitions, and others. Well, that's important, but I think it's usual, and then now we are going to pass. Other thing, now there is a new approach for exceptional considerations. In the previous edition, there was an exceptional consideration about for existing buildings in developing countries. But now, in the new edition, the exceptional consideration is for existing buildings. That's all. Why? Well, it's complicated because who is a developing country? It's not clear sometimes, and also people need the same things in a country or in other country. If you are traveling, you have the same needs in one country or other country, and then it's better to consider all countries in the same way. There aren't different types or categories in countries. All the countries are the same, and when it's necessary to consider an exception, then for instance for existing buildings, then it's for all countries. Well, this is a little bit changed. Other thing then about the tactile working surface indicators. Well, now the new version, you can find the new reference with the specific standard about this, and now you can see a new specific subclause for tactile working surface indicators, the 5.1 5.4. Also, the annex about this was revised. In the previous standard, of course, there were tactile working surface, but it was not very clear. It was difficult to find in the document where is the tactile working surface. Now you can find easily the consideration about that. If you go to 5.1.4, and then you can read everything about that. Other thing, the visual contrast. This is one of the main changes, I think. Now there is a new clause, the 5.3, and then there are some innovation there. First one, the difference between large surfaces and small items. Because the need for visual contrast between a wall and the floor is not the same as in an elevator control panel, for instance. And then there are different considerations. Also, there are new methods for determining the values. We have Michelson and Weber's methods are now considered to determine the luminance contrast values. They are more accurate than the previous method. Well, it's not very intuitive, or it's not very easy, but my colleagues said it's much better, these new methods, and then I believe it. Of course, there are new tables on both new features are added for new methods, and also about there are special consideration for glossy or shiny materials. And then if you go to this new 5.3 clause, you find different new tables and with the difference between large surfaces and small items, with different methods to use, and special considerations for glossy or shiny materials. And also there is a new annex to the dialect calculation. I think is very advanced, maybe. Is with formulas. Well, it's for advance if you want to develop about to know more detail about the methods, the new methods to determining values. Well, more new things in this standard. Visual contrast, important, and well, acoustics in 5.7 and emergency warning system in 5.8. These are two things that in the previous edition are not very clear. The team force considered that it's important to find easily and to reorder the considerations about that. Now they have more prominence in the standard. Acoustics and emergency warning system and signals and information. More things. Well, this is a little bit clarification about obstacles in a path. some clarifications. For instance, we added new cases. New cases have been included, such as overhanging facade, you can see, with a risk of hitting your head. This is a new scenario, letter A, that in the previous standard only the other cases. More things. Well, about ramps. A complete revision about ramps in section 6.4. We have new tables, and now now you enter with gradient of the ramp and find left or rise. Previously, it was the other way around. It's a little bit different, but well, experts say that this is better, it's more accurate. Also, there are separate tables for ramps, because previously it was in the same table, and it's a little bit strange. And for instance, handrails for car ramps and something like that is a little bit strange. And when this new way to get the parameters of the ramp, you can well, it's more accurate calculations, and you can interpolate data, and then if it knows exactly the values, you can find the intermediate value. I think it's interesting. In many cases, don't panic. In many cases, is more or less the same values. Only in some special cases is a little bit different. And then the methodology and the tables are new, but the results are very similar. More things, a complete revision for ramps and a complete revision for elevators in section 8.5. There's new considerations about button panels, about open time, very important, about approach to the lift, not only the cabin, the approach to the lift, and the different types of lifts. Oh, well, there is in general a complete revision. This is other the main news in the standard. The ramps, elevators, and the evacuation is the third main change. Well, now evacuation is in section 11, fire emergency evacuation, and then you can find many things. Many of them is the same that the previous one, but there are also some new things. But previously I said that emergency warning system was in 5.8, and about elevators, the lifts for evacuation is in 8.5.8, and in other sections you can find consideration for fire resisting door sets. Conclusion about that, evacuation is in section 11, but is considered a transversal issue. And then there are things about evacuation in many clauses of the document. Of course, there are also annex on fire prevention. Now it's Annex D, but this annex is different than the previous one, because the content is a little bit different. Then, again, evacuation is in 11 section, but also evacuation is in all the document. Stay tuned. Well, at the end, there are the annexes, and there is a new annex, and I think it's the more innovative annex, Annex A, about housing. It's informative, but for the first time, an international standard regulates the accessibility inside the home. Because until now, it was a taboo subject. And many people say, in my house, I do what I want. Well, okay, but if you sell the house, okay. I think is very interesting. Is a little, I think from my point of view, is very short, but it's important because it's the first step. But for the future, in future versions and for other standards, to develop the idea that the accessibility inside the home is important. Is important. Well, this is about the news for this standard. At the end, if you have some questions, we can talk about that. But there is no any time, and then let's go with the second case study. The second case study is the standard EN 17210, accessibility and functional requirements. Well, this is the scope is European Union, but I think it's interesting for everybody because the content I think is very interesting for everybody, for every countries. Let's go with the scope and goals. Well, it's half an European scope. It's from mandate 420 of the European Commission. It's about buildings and about public space. This is important because the previous one, the ISO 21542, is only about buildings. And this one is about buildings and public space, planning, street, again. More things. Well, for common harmonization, they want to start the process to make this standard applicable in all European Union countries. And then maybe in a few years, it's a mandatory document for some countries. Maybe, I don't know. And special, I think this is the more important thing about this standard. Accessibility is focused from functional requirements. What I mean when I say functional requirements? Well, common standards define parameters, talk about the built environment, and define parameters. How much, how long, and well, numbers for wide, numbers for tall. But the problem, I don't know your experience, but I have some colleagues that they don't understand for what that numbers. For instance, if when I ask, I'm an architect, and when some colleagues, why do you draw a circle in the accessible toilet? Oh, I don't know, because regulation says it's necessary. But yes, but for what? What's the target of that? Ah, no, I don't know. Well, and many times, if you don't understand, it's difficult that you follow well all the process. No? Other thing, for instance, why is it necessary to keep free and space close to the toilet? Many people do not know why. They only know, well, it's 90 centimeters. For what? I don't know. Well, this standard is different, because this standard is not about numbers. It's not defined. It's defined needs. This standard is about what, why, the things. And then in the example of the toilet, this standard do not define a number. This standard say that it's necessary enough free space close to the toilet, so every person can transfer from the wheelchair to the toilet. This is the need. This is the functional requirement. And then if you understand clearly this, it's easier to consider in your project better. And now, and then in a country, maybe they say, oh, this is 90. Or in other country, they can say, oh, this is 80. Well, this is secondary. The most important thing that is to define well why is necessary, what is necessary. And I think this is the most important thing of this standard. It's not about numbers, it's about needs, but it's technical. Well, and then the drawings, the figures are descriptive. Explaining is not for not to dimensioning, is to explain. For instance, if we are talking about visual contrast, in stairs, the drawing highlight the key points. In this figure in the screen, you can see a stair and define highlight two key points. The first one, the previous band with tactile element, is necessary to locate the change of level. And the other key point is the edge of every step. It's very important to control the distance. Well, you can see they are the two key points for visual contrast. Also for visual contrast, in a corridor, the two key points. The first one, the difference of visual contrast between the wall and the floor. And the other key point is the visual contrast between the door and the wall. They are the two key points. So drawings in this standard is not for numbers, it's for locate the key points in the different situations. How is the structure of this standard? Well, At the beginning, there are the usual sections about the scope, the reference standards, terms, and definitions. Important, of course, but it's common in all standards. But there is, I think, I like these two sections, 4 and 5. Section 4 is legal framework and associate benefits. I think it's interesting about the benefits, and especially the 5 section is about diversity of users and design considerations, because it's important to keep in mind, for instance, not only wheelchair, not only disability, accessibility is for all. And I think it's interesting to read at the beginning for understand all the standard. Well, they are the section from 1 to 5. They are the intro. After that, we have the core chapters with common requirements in every spaces. We have wayfinding, accessibility in outdoor, parking, horizontal and vertical circulation in buildings, toilets, about the different controls and switches, evacuation, environmental condition buildings. Well, there are the different main issues, the core chapters. But I think it's interesting. There are that's not all. There are other sections from 16 to 20. They are a specific section for a specific use. For instance, existing accommodation or cultural and sport and leisure buildings, administrative and service buildings, urban areas, transport infrastructures. In all these sections, at the beginning, say, because it's a complementary section, all of them starts saying in this section apply the requirements from section 6 to 15, and also the follow specific considerations, blah, blah, blah. Well, then the common standard sections, the core chapters with common requirements, and the specific use. And finally, the annexes about fire, about management and maintenance, and at the end, the bibliography. Also, in this standard, there are 2 technical reports. They are different documents, but they are associated, complementary to the main document. The first one is the TR 7621, is technical performance criteria and specifications. Okay, technical criteria. And the other one is the TR 17622 about the conformity assessment. Well, very quickly, the first one. The first one about the technical consideration is, at the end, they are the target of this technical report is to offer examples, different solutions to answer the functional requirements. And then, if we have in the main standard with just an example. For instance, the profile of handrails in the main standard talk about adequate about the size, etc. But in the technical report, there are exactly the same structure, and to answer every number, every letter with a parameter. And sometimes sometimes what different solutions, because sometimes there are different possibilities. And the other technical report is about accessibility conformity assessment, and at the end is a methodology and templates for the to validate to the conformity assessment for the accessibility. Then it's just a methodology, and I think maybe it's an interesting tool for audits or something like that. Well, the last one is the ISO 2194902 about accessible tourism for all. Well, key ideas about that. It's chaired by the World Tourism Organization. I think this is interesting, with the participation of many countries in this standard. It's the first international standard for accessibility tourism, and then this is very innovative, very interesting. And there is an holistic point of view, because it's about built environment and also about management, and have a very practical approach, because it's for technicians and also for tourism agents. About the structure, very similar. The common standard section, the scope, normative reference, terms and definitions. But in section 4, about there are general considerations and for training, information, service. But in 4.5, there are common requirements in the built environment, and there is a list and definition and develop different special elements that there is in tourist building, in tourist spaces. For instance, a toilet, an accessible toilet is the same in a restaurant or in a hotel or in a train station or an airport or something like that. Well, common standard sections, the requirements, key recommendations, and after that, there are the specific sections. Policy and strategies for the public sector, 6 about transport, 7 about the public spaces, urban and rural, 8 leisure activities, 9 meeting, incentives, conventions and exhibitions. Section 10 is about accommodation, 11 for food and beverage service, catering, 12 about tour operators and travel agencies, and finally the annexes. And then they are the specific considerations. the specific sections, if you check the tourism accessibility chain, they are the different parts of this chain. And then with this list, we cover all the accessibility chain. Well, how to use it? Well, the section from 1 to 4 are for everybody, for everyone, because they are common considerations. And from 5 to 12, there are specific sections. And then if I have a hotel, and then I have to consider sections from 1 to 4, and I can look for my section, number 10, accommodation. In the case, apply section 1 to 4 and number 10. In other situation, apply sections 1 to 4 and other section. This is the idea to how to use the standard. Well, remember again, the keys to this standard is a standard that covers the whole travel experience, the preparation, transport, resources, and activities. It addresses implementation, accessibility in the built environment, and management, the training, the maintenance. And it is not a technical standard. It's important because all technical things refers to ISO 21542. Well, and in this case, they are complementary. Also, it's intended as a tool for tourism managers. Of course, it's a tool for architects or for accessibility consultants, but the idea is that it will useful for hotel managers, restaurant owners, and other tourism managers, not only for technicians. And finally, it's available in English, French, and Spanish. Well, concluding because it's time. About these 3 case studies. First, we have 3 new, very useful tools with interesting new features. Standards are tools. 2, first of all, we need to know what they are for and how to use them. Please remember the beginning of my presentation about the different levels and how to use them. The starting point, the target. Number 3, it's necessary, we must compare them with the regulation in our countries. These standards are complementary, but it's important to consider to compare with the regulation in every country. And 4, all of these standards show us that nowadays accessibility is presented as something transversal, not only for buildings, and not only for built environment. It's important the other things, products, the service, because our society, our world is all merits. Accessibility is a chain, and transversal because it's not only for technicians. These standards are for everybody related who the tourism or buildings or something like that, not only technicians. Well, at the end, I think with this idea that accessibility is something transversal, then I understand that the future or inaccessibility is teamwork. And many of us are not familiarized with this idea, but the future inaccessibility is teamwork. Well, it's time before questions. I would like to recall a phrase of the great American urban planner Jane Jacobs, who says cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created for everybody. Thank you very much. You have my email, and let's go with the questions.
Thank you, Delphin. This is Malcolm. So we have a few questions in chat, and if anyone has additional questions, would they please put them in the Q&A section? Our first question is EN 17210 harmonized with ISO 21542, or are there any differences?
Well, I have the honor to participate in these in all of these standards, and when we work on the European standard, one of the main reference, it was the 21542. The problem is that the second version, it wasn't close, and then maybe there are some things that it's not exactly the same, but I think it's not a problem because this EN is about functional requirements, and then the numbers maybe is not very important. Maybe if you look at the ISO 21542 and the first technical report, maybe it's a little, many things are the same, but maybe there are a little bit that is not the same. But the technical report is just an example, and then is only a reference. The important thing in EN is the functional requirement, and the functional requirement, I think, is totally agree with the requirements from 21542.
Thank you. We have another question. Is there incorporation of cycling facilities into section 16 through 20 of EN 17210?
Oh, can you repeat me again, please?
Yes. Is there incorporation of cycling facilities in the section 16 through 20 of EN 17210?
I don't remember exactly the clause, but I know yes, it's considering, but I don't remember if exactly in this subclause or maybe in other section. I don't remember now, but yes, I'm sure it's considered.
Great. And one more question. What updates to the standards or changes would you consider most impactful? something like the what, why versus dimensional clarifications that you went over previously?
Well, I have talked about 3 different standards, and I don't know if the question is about one of them or it's general.
General.
Okay. In general, I think the most interesting things from my point of view is in the new version of 21542 is that the revision consider new things about evacuation, about visual contrast, about some issues that 11 or 12 years ago they were not very important, because some years ago accessibility is mainly physical accessibility about wheelchairs and others, and to consider, for instance, visual contrast, I think is very important. It's very important. But for me, the most important thing in this standard is to clarify many things. Maybe it's not very innovative in parameters, but now it's easier to understand, easier to find things. I think this is the most relevant thing. In the second standard, I think the most important thing is the idea to the functional requirements, because it's very important. Not only the parameter, it's important the reason behind the parameter. And in the last one about tourism, I think the most important thing is to consider all the chain of the whole experience of the tourist, not only the hotel or not only the plane, all the experience, and the consideration of not only for architects or not only for technicians, focus in every people in the tourism sector.
Thank you. We have one final question in chat. ISO 21542 has incorporated lowered standards for retrofitting. This at few places goes below the minimum standards of 21542. I fear this is going to be a problem, an excuse to be used by property owners. Do you have any comments on this?
Well, I don't know how to how to explain. I don't know. This is a problem. Many situations, people say, if you ask, if you mark a very high level, maybe the consequence is everybody thinks, that's impossible. This standard is impossible. Forget it. Yes, but I think this is not the scenario, because in the standard, don't forget, there are different types of considerations. The basic consideration with shall, and the recommendations with should. And then, if you want the excellence, you must consider all of them. But if you have some difficulties, you can choose and look only the basic considerations. And I think this is the flexibility to get that the standard is possible.
Thank you very much, Delphin. This is Malcolm again, and I want to thank Delphin for such a lovely and informative presentation today. I want to thank Beth for her lovely ASL interpretation and Tina for doing such a great job with the captions. For upcoming IAAP webinars, we have on April 26th an EU webinar, Accessibility in Procurement, Sharing Innovative Solutions. May 10th, we have a built environment webinar, Accessibility around Historical Cultural Buildings for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And May 26th, we kick off our Accessible Digital Content series with Creating Accessible Content, the Inclusion Challenge. Once again, I want to thank Delphin and our support team, and everyone have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
It's a pleasure. Bye-bye.